Hi, welcome everybody. We're back again to talk about the elements of the Renters' Rights Bill. Now, this one was a last-minute addition, really. It was an amendment put forward probably 3 or 4 days before the bill went to its third reading in Parliament, and it seems to be the one that's created a lot of discussion because it could possibly be deemed as anti-tenant as opposed to increasing the rights. Anyway, we'll, as usual, go through the video or watch the video that I've already done on rent in advance. If you've already watched it, please feel free, forward it until we start the discussion, and then we're going to have a discussion about it and the implications moving forward. So let's watch the video. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the new rules regarding rents in advance. Now, these changes are, in my opinion, too complicated and unnecessarily so. If I read the legislation word for word, it would seem even more complex. So I'm just going to try and explain it in plain English. So, accepting an amount of rent other than the first month's rent, i.e. 1 month's rent, will be banned. An important part of the new assured tenancy agreement, the future looking tenancy agreement, i.e. when the bill becomes law, is that a rent period cannot be longer than 1 calendar month. So any clauses that state that rent is payable quarterly or 4 weekly or 6 monthly will be null and void, basically. Including those in existing agreements when the bill actually becomes law. So typically taking a 6-month or 12-month rent in advance for a tenant with a poor credit history, for example, is not allowed. Any clauses in agreements referring to any sort of rent in advance will have no legal effect and, as I said, will be null and void. Next, this is where it gets slightly complicated. So accepting the first month's rent before the tenancy agreement is actually signed is also banned. If this is done, it will be classed as a prohibited payment under the Tenant Fee Act 2019 and it'll be illegal. So that act has been amended to take this into account. Taking a holding deposit and a tenancy deposit prior to the agreement being signed, that's still okay. That will still be allowed. So therefore, the first month's rent has to be taken during what is called a permitted pre-tenancy period. Now, basically, this is the period from when the tenancy agreement is entered into. In other words, it's signed by all parties, and the day before the first day of the tenancy. In other words, the first day of the tenancy is effectively the moving date. So this will undoubtedly change the way in which tenants are onboarded for both agents and certainly for landlords who currently self-manage. So while the policy, in the government's words, aims to protect vulnerable tenants from financial exploitation, paying that much money in advance, obviously, it may actually inadvertently narrow access to housing for certain groups of people. I really don't get this one at all. Landlords will look probably to tighten eligibility criteria based on not only this but many other aspects of the Renters' Rights Bill. It could be detrimental for certain tenants who rely on the rent in advance mechanism to secure a property. So we're looking at individuals with poor credit scores, irregular income, such as freelancers, self-employed professionals, international students, expats coming back to the country, to mention just a few. You know, they are not your typical people with a credit score for this particular scenario. I've tried to simplify these rules on rent in advance. They are more complicated than that, and if we do get to a situation, obviously like that in the future, ask questions. It's fine, or even better, just let us take care of everything for you.
Yeah, big one. This one, probably the one that's being talked about the most, and I think that's down to the fact that it was a last minute amendment and seemed to have got through without any discussion beforehand.
And little thought. And little thought.
Yeah, as I say in the video, I think it's the part of the bill that's more anti-tenancies, anti-tenants, certain groups of tenants than ever. So, I mean, rent in advance. Where are we with rent in advance? Do we take them a lot?
Yeah, we do. We do take, like you said in the video, people that are moving from abroad, who have no credit file. They need to open a bank account with a tenancy agreement, but without paying the rent in advance, they're not going to proceed forward. Students is a massive one as well. So they get their loans in instalments. So once they receive that each term, they like to pay rent in advance. So that's going to be a huge one.
We're going to see more students falling into arrears because unless they're going to change it so they actually get the loans monthly rather than quarterly.
I read it this morning actually. Before I came in, somebody estimated that the number of tenancies that start with a rent in advance payment is about 7 or 8% of the market.
Yeah.
If you look at how many tenants there are, that's about 250,000 tenants who
are going to be affected,
who pay rent in advance at the minute, and it's all those different groups. But as you say, the student market, which is worth billions to the UK economy.
Yeah.
I just don't know where it's going to go. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest that when this part of the bill goes to the House of Lords, it will change. But at the minute, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, the student situation is massive.
But I think as well, it's we've got a health system that's under pressure. You bring in foreign doctors and nurses in. That's we see a big number of those coming to our area. And they're not going to pass the criteria because they're not, as Laura said earlier, they're not going to have a credit file, which then means, again, they can't open a bank account here, which then without a tenancy agreement, and they can't get a property because they can't open a credit file. So it's just, there's been all these discrimination laws brought in, which I completely agree with, but now we're giving everybody an opportunity. It's kind of,
It's a form.
It is a form of discrimination, yeah. Because now, if people are making a conscious decision, to pay rent in advance, if they can't provide a guarantor, if somebody's got, like you said, a poor credit score but can't provide a guarantor, a rent in advance is another way of them securing accommodation, and that opportunity is being removed. So it's gonna put more pressure. Well, it's probably going to put more pressure on social housing. So,
I mean, the reason for doing it, again, the government have said it's to stop landlords financially exploiting tenants by taking more than a month's rent in advance. And from what I can see, it comes from down in Planet London again.
Yeah,
it seems it's a practice that sort of goes on.
But probably, Darren, because there's more people coming into the country from abroad into that area. It's a much more cosmopolitan lifestyle, isn't it?
And it's going to alienate a lot of those people.
It's not. Yeah, it's going to prevent them getting a property.
I mean, in terms of okay, that's the sort of underlying problem that we see with the whole concept.
Yeah,
and then you've got this strict criteria. And this pre-tenancy period where you can't take the rent before the agreement's signed.
Yeah.
Take it between the agreement being signed and the tenant moving in. But you can take a holding deposit and a tenancy deposit before the agreement's signed, because that's supposedly classed as consideration, which makes the agreement in force. I mean, it's just going to be crazy.
To be honest, it's kind of probably the way that we work now anyway. I mean, the deposit and the rent are paid at the same time, but it's done kind of all done simultaneously. So that's an easy fix for us. But for those...
What, in terms of taking the deposit before and then taking the rent?
No, no.
I think it depends. As I say, we are talking sort of hypothetically because it's not been agreed yet. We'll see what happens.
I mean, obviously, don't forget that even with the holding deposit, there's still strict processes in place before the tenancy starts. You've got the extension documents and everything else that have to be served. So I don't see that that's going to be too big an issue. It's not going to be an issue for us as an agency. It will be an issue for landlords who go and do multiple viewings at the property and take a payment off the tenant whilst they're there for rent, and then they move in a few days' time before any documents are done. You know, that's going to be, like you said, it's going to be a prohibitive payment, so there's a chance of a fine there. But also, when it comes to if that property then needs to go for repossession and that's all been done, not all been served correctly in the first place, that's just going to add to pressure, even more pressure there.
Yeah, so when you get your property back, no, they've proven that there's been a breach.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like you said, at the moment, we normally take the first month rent and the tenancy deposit as moving.
At an appropriate time, as it still will be. Yeah.
If we have to just change that process slightly to take the tenancy deposit first and then the rent after, that's easily changed. But it's going to be so confusing and getting those time periods and making sure there's enough time between signing the agreement and moving in to actually take the rent and it's clear and to make sure that everything's all ready for that move-in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that is the intended consequence to make it more difficult, but actually what it's going to do is when a tenancy does get into trouble, because let's face it, until there's a problem, there isn't a problem. But once there's a problem, all those timescales, like Laura knows too well, are going to be absolutely critical. So if there's a lawyer involved in the from the tenant side that's sort of saying this timescale wasn't adhered to, this hasn't been done properly, this wasn't done at the right time, that just prevents, and those arrears build up.
Yeah.
And then again, like we've talked about before, if you haven't got an insurance policy and you're going backwards and forwards to court, the costs just escalate, as well as the arrears.
And we've seen it in the past with new legislation. A lot of the decisions that are made tend to depend on case law. So you're only going to need one case where you've taken the deposit at the wrong time, or you've taken the first month's rent at the wrong time, and then that becomes the one that everybody refers to in
absolutely.
So that then becomes an issue.
Yeah.
I know we haven't got an alternative deposit scheme.
No.
Where obviously you can pay for an insurance,
a warranty.
I'm not even sure at this point how that's going to fit in because.
Well, it won't. It won't in the way certainly that we've used it in the past, because that's something that's taken out.
Payments again, isn't
Absolutely.
If the tenant signs that or takes out that policy prior to signing the agreement, again, this is the detail that we're really sort of waiting for. That will be deemed, because a prohibited payment from a third party, or to a third party, is a prohibited payment. So I don't know where even that's going to fit in.
No.
Yeah, this one.
I think the rents in advance probably increased more when the 5-week limit was put on for the deposit, because prior to that you'd have probably, for extra security rather than rent in advance, you'd have asked for 2 months deposit, which would have been registered and would have been logged and kept in the right place. But since that's reduced to 5 weeks, the landlord's more exposed, therefore the criteria had to change and that wasn't an option anymore.
Just to explain on that, the maximum amount of tenancy deposit is actually 6 weeks, but that's €10,000 or more rent, and we live in Derby, so that just... So we always refer to it as a maximum of 5 weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the one that everybody's sort of, from what I could hear...
It came from nowhere.
It's the one that everybody's waiting for, because it does seem to be anti-tenant to a degree and probably not achieving what...
I'm not sure who it benefits. I'm not sure. It doesn't. I don't think it benefits anybody.
No.
I mean, the tenants they prefer. The students want to pay their rent quarterly so that they know what money they've got left once they've paid the rent is theirs.
That is one suggestion.
Yeah.
Has come in from a number of places, that if the tenant offers to pay, then could that be accepted? Instead of the landlord insisting that they pay rent in advance. If the tenant says, look, I'm prepared to pay rent in advance without being coerced or threatened.
Yeah, but how do you prove that when it comes down to it? If it ever goes to court, how do you prove that?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if the tenant wants the property, they'll say, yeah, well, I offered to pay for it. So I don't know.
They might not do 6 months later when they've not paid the next lot of rent.
No, and I saw a question asked on a forum. So tenant pays 6 months rent in advance on the 1st of May. Bill becomes law on the 1st of July. Does that mean that the landlord has then got to repay the 4 months? At the moment, I think pretty much legislation says no, it's not retrospective. So when that initial 6 months rent in advance is up, that'll be the way.
More to the point, what if you pay 6 months rent in advance and moves out after 3? Then what happens?
Well, yeah.
Then you're going to come back to
and the fixed term tenancy things coming into it at all. It's going
to be interesting.
Yeah, it's a real complicated one. I say it. We'll see if it changes. But
food for thought.
Absolutely. So yeah, rent in advance, strange one. We'll see what happens on that one. But any questions, please get in touch. You know, we're here to help. We're here to support. And that's it for this one. We'll see what happens with that, and we'll see you next time.